And welcome back. I am joined by the one and only Nick Demao at sniper_1154. My name is Quinten Krzysko. We are building the board, and we are here today to talk about the always difficult linebacker position. Nick, how are you doing this evening?
Good. I'm hanging in there. Like you said, this is a fun position to scout. I feel like as Bears fans, it's in our blood to look for good linebackers. So it was good going through the tape and trying to find the next potential great Bears linebacker if they're in this draft class somewhere.
And it's interesting. I have a friend of mine, Danny Meehan, on Twitter. He said something the other day that was like, and he's a big, if anyone out there knows or follows Danny, he's a big linebacker guy. Like he's a linebacker, running back guy.
Gotcha.
And he said he believes linebacker play is at an all-time low in the NFL. I was like,
Yeah.
It was right after I was talking to you about it, and you were saying something about Jalon Walker. It's like, well, yeah, Georgia, they play these guys like they never learn a position because they get to play all like that feels like it's what's happening in the NFL.
Yeah.
These linebackers are never really learning the position very well, and it seems and they keep getting smaller and smaller, and they can't play like a meathead like me. I want them to stack and shed. Right. I want to see it. And there's like one guy in this class.
It's definitely gone are the days of like that sweet. What was the guy? Was it Brian Cox on the Bears that like in the 90s that had the big neck roll? And then I remember he was just like a menace. And it's like, it seems like those days are gone. Because like you said, everything's shifting towards being more athletic. I mean, the traditional downhill linebackers are almost a forgotten breed nowadays. It's those thumpers that can come in the box and just take on blockers, plug up running lanes. I mean, they still have a place, but it's like, well, can he drop into coverage now? And it's like
you need to hit that requisite level of being able to play coverage,
exactly.
right? It's like a lot. Like there's a guy from Nebraska, I think, named Lander Barton, who I watched, and it was like he's fun. He's big, he's decently fast, but it's like that dude can't play coverage for his life.
Yeah,
but he can stack and shed. Know.
I hope he's not watching. No.
Yeah, for real though. If I loved your tape, but
there's. I mean, it's going to be a common theme going through these linebackers. Like, there's not. It's a lot of them. I feel like can do the bare bones coverage, but you'll see, like you said, because now there's so much emphasis on positional versatility and not learning the linebacking position as much as, like with Jalon Walker, they were moving him all over the defensive line. You see some of the, I guess there's fewer polished prospects, I think, nowadays, which, makes it interesting to go through the tape because there are a couple guys that I'm really high on that I think just are plug and play starters. But yeah, I mean, it is one of those things where you see some guys and it's like they've got glue in their hips. And I'm like, oh, I don't know. You might just be special teams for a few years, like just running straight downhill and carve out your niche that way.
Yeah. Now, before we get too much into prospects, we want to start off with a bit more Bears-centric conversation here of what do the Bears have on their roster at linebacker right now? So we pulled up the salary cap stuff here, and Nick, did you want to go ahead and take that?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty thin right now. I mean, really, it's the three guys I'm pretty sure everyone knows. It's Tremaine Edmonds, TJ Edwards, and Sanborn. And then there's one guy, Carl Jones Jr., who is a 24-year-old outside linebacker, and I have never heard of him before. And I like to think I have a decent grasp on the guys, but I mean, he could just be someone they picked up off the street at the end of the year just to hold him over. But I mean, after that, Noah Sewell is another guy who we kind of talked about. I don't know if he has a home at linebacker. He doesn't really have a home at all on the roster because he doesn't play. But I know there were whispers when he was first drafted if he's a defensive end or what his position might be. So it'll definitely be it's a position. I don't know if I'd say they're a little top heavy, I think, with Edmonds and the cap that they've put into the Edmonds and Edwards. But it's definitely a position that I would think that they're going to look to improve over the offseason, either through the draft or free agency.
Now, one thing I look at here when I see this, like I you don't gain much from moving on from Edmonds, right? Maybe in a
Right.
trade, like if you were to trade him pre June 1, you could save 12.5 million cap. If there's someone willing to take that on and someone interested in taking it on, there might be.
Right.
Maybe you can work something out there. But if not, something I'm really curious about. I'm not sure if Tremaine Edmonds has ever had a coach, at least not on the NFL level,
Mm-hmm.
who is insistent that he is getting downhill against the run.
Right.
Because right, like with in Buffalo and in Chicago, both those coaches were like, "You're deep middle, right? You
Yeah.
are a deep
Yeah.
middle coverage player first. You're
Use your
everything
length.
else second." And I
Yeah.
think with Dennis Allen, he's going to need to be a downhill player first
Right.
and a coverage player second. And I'm interested to see how that works out because
Yeah.
I mean, Dennis Allen is not one to mince words either. So
Right.
like
Right.
it'll be interesting to see, how he takes that harder coaching at the same time as being asked to be more physical there.
Yeah, because I'll be curious too. I wonder if he was one of the players that, not necessarily Ben Johnson, but I know when the Bears hired Ben Johnson, one of the prerequisites was like you cannot be married to any player on the roster. And I mean, everyone knows Tremaine Edmonds was a Matt Eberflus. That was a guy he identified as, this is who I want to run the middle of my defense. So I would think if they needed to move on from him, they would. It'll be really fascinating because, like you said, his makeup as a player isn't exactly what Dennis Allen looks for in a middle linebacker. I mean, if you look at Demario
Well,
Davis and just like, and he hasn't. I guess I
just
shouldn't say.
traits. Just
Yeah,
traits.
yeah,
He's the
the
player
trait.
that everyone wants at middle
Yeah, I
linebacker,
should. I
right?
should. I should rephrase that. Yeah, he's never been asked to do it, like you said, with Dennis Allen
Well,
and
yeah, he's never done
attacking down.
it.
So it'll be interesting. Yeah, because um, I mean, maybe Dennis Allen will unlock him. I'm sure there's. I feel like he has the capability of being more violent in the run game and more of a pass rushing threat. But like you said, they kind of just got comfortable letting him sit in his bubble and use his long arms to swat passes.
Well, and that's where I'm skeptical of it because I'm generally a believer that violence and aggression isn't something you can coach into someone.
Yeah.
And going back to his college tape, that's never been something that's always been his knock is
Right.
that he's not that downhill aggressor.
Hmm.
And so I'm interested to see because I think it's a really good case study of that question will
Yeah.
be this year and how he plays through being asked to be a different player than he's historically been.
Yeah.
But besides Edmonds, because I do think I think he's probably here this year. I think
Yeah.
you're gonna have a hard time moving that contract, and it's not really worth the $4 million in cap save. Like for the $4 million in cap savings, can you really find a player who's gonna fit better than Tremaine Edmonds? Like
Right.
I'm just not sure that that's there. But with TJ Edwards, it gets a little more interesting to me
Hmm.
with how much that he downgraded once Andrew Billings went out.
Yeah.
Is that something where you say you look at his contract and you're saying we only got 1.5 million of dead cap if we move on from him and we save 5.5 million? Is that something that you think you can replicate behind Andrew Billings being back, or is it something that you think is worth keeping?
Yeah. I know he's a fan favorite, but I also think he was playing the Lance Briggs role in. I mean, it wasn't a Tampa 2, but it was a cover 2 defense where the action is getting funneled to his direction, and he's
Mhm.
making the tackles, and he's cleaning up basically. I shouldn't say cleaning up. He's the spearhead of stopping the opponent's action because the way the defense was trying to funnel it towards that weak side linebacker.
Yeah, so it generally Billings was playing in front of
Yeah,
him, which gives him more space to eat because Billings can eat up more
yeah.
gaps.
And And with Dennis Allen's defense, I don't know if he has. I don't think that, like, I need to do more research on Dennis Allen's defense. I know it's a very downhill, aggressive defense, but when I look back at like those Saints teams, we talked about Alex Anzalone was a Saint, Zach Bond, even though I don't think he really played, but those are more athletic linebackers that I feel
Even
like
like Pete Werner.
are using their speed, are not exactly. They're more, and I don't want to call Edwards a reactive player. I think he is a proactive player, but I think they were more attacking the offense versus waiting for the action to funnel towards them. So I'll be curious what happens with TJ Edwards. I think if he got released, it'll be one of those things where fans are going to be like, well, he had a great year. But if you actually dig into the numbers, he did not have a,
it
was
was
probably
playing well before Billings went out. And then it just went like it. They tried to cover the run problems with him funneling up more, which just made him much more susceptible in coverage, and like it didn't go well.
Yeah, it was tough. So I mean, it'll depend. I think if they released him, it would probably be after the draft. Is it? Yeah, it'll probably be after the draft. I was gonna say I don't know if it's a difference if it's post June 1 or before then.
There might be a difference in cap savings, but I mean, I don't think you have much benefit to post June 1sting him because you're already saving most of the money anyways.
Yeah,
why spread it over 2 years?
Right. Yeah, because I'm of the mentality of like if the Bears went into the next season with the linebackers they have now, which is Sanborn, Edmonds, and Edwards, and mystery man Carl Jones Jr., I wouldn't be upset with Edwards and Edmonds starting. I think they're a fine linebacking duo. I think there's bigger holes to fill on the defense, but it is one of those questions, if Ian Cunningham gets hired by the Jaguars and the Bears get an extra third-round pick at the end of the draft, I mean, that's kind of like that third round is a sweet spot for some of these linebackers that I think could come in and replicate, especially what Edwards did last year. I still think, like Edmonds is going to stick around, but there's guys that I think you could even look at. I mean, we'll talk about like a Danny Stutsman or someone that you could look at that has a similar frame to Edward or Edmonds, that could maybe come and sit a year behind him and then take over, who's more of a downhill attacking linebacker. But maybe you learn a year behind someone with a similar frame like Edmonds and coverage. So it'll be interesting. I think it's one of those positions people aren't like pinning as something the Bears are going to do much in, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a shakeup, especially seeing how much Demario Davis meant to that Saints defense for
everything.
A decade. Yeah, like it's a very important position in this defense. So I could see Dennis Allen, on day 2 really wanting to get one of these guys.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think so too. And that brings us to our next question of how much draft capital can we expect the Bears to put into the linebacker position this year?
So if I feel like if they want to get a guy that I think could start right away, they're going to have to probably spend at least a third round pick. And they've got 2 seconds, a first, and like I said, they might get another third if Ian Cunningham goes away, or not goes away, but takes the Jacksonville Jaguars GM job. I'd honestly be I would imagine if they do draft a linebacker, it'll just be one. I can't see them double dipping at linebacker. But then again, I couldn't see them double dipping when Eberflus got hired and they took a nickel corner and a safety back to back.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's weirder things have happened, but I think with the direction they're going, I could see there's a couple of guys that I kind of have third round grades on that if they get to that fringe day 2, day 3, where maybe they're dropping and the Bears do have that extra third round pick, I could see them pulling the trigger on some of these guys because I do think there's talent. It's a little unrefined talent, but yeah, I think they've got to try to throw some darts to find somebody to, put in Dennis Allen's defense that can, make it an attacking linebacker.
Yeah. I mean, I'm with you. I think that if they get that Ian Cunningham comp pick, that's to be right around pick 100,
Yeah.
101. I think that if they're taking a linebacker, that's where it makes the most
Yeah.
sense, there or later. I don't think we see a pick in the top 100 for a linebacker.
I don't.
Though.
Yeah.
Like I think it's that 101 and on range with that comp pick in fourth round and after. That's where it makes the most sense. But the last question that we have, which we've already touched on a little, is what are the Bears looking for to linebacker for Dennis Allen's defense?
So from what I've researched, the little Saints film that I've watched, a little bit of, I mean, we know Dennis Allen wants to attack the offense. We've had, Bears fans have kind of been not exposed, but we've gotten comfortable watching offenses that sort of react to what, or defenses rather, that react to what the offense is doing. And I think Dennis Allen is a tone, like he wants the defense to inflict its will on the offense. He wants
Right.
the offense to adjust to the defense instead of vice versa. So, I think, he's going to look for linebackers that can blitz well, athletic linebackers. He wants guys, I think, that can, get thin at the line of scrimmage, get through, be run stoppers, blitz the quarterback. I don't know how much emphasis he puts on coverage for, I mean, I don't know if, I don't know if he's looking for a guy like Tremaine Edmonds that's almost solely going to be a coverage linebacker. I mean, I know he wants, of course, they want a guy that's not going to be a liability in coverage, but I don't think it's one of the traits that they're emphasizing as much as athleticism. Can he get to the quarterback? Can he stop the run? Can he be violent at the line of scrimmage and inflict, his will on opposing linemen versus kind of, being more passive or reactive. So that's the gist I get. And it, I don't know who the Bears had, I mean, the closest I think would probably be Jack Sanborn. I thought when he was playing, he seems to be running around with his head on fire, but I don't know if that's the play style they're looking for. I think they want someone a little more athletic than Jack Sanborn, but that sort of mentality.
Yeah, I think of it as like versatility, IQ, and athleticism. That's
Yeah.
like, and those are three like boilerplate things. But like,
Right.
I mean, I look at they drafted Zach Bond because Zach Bond could double as a defensive end linebacker, and that created mystery within the defense of what he was doing each play and how he could
Right.
take stuff away from people. And then I have to think because of the size that he likes on D line, I think that leads to the smarts and versatility. He wants the linebackers to be the motor. I think the
Yeah.
linebackers and the corners are the motor of his defense, is the way I see it.
Right.
Where you need the D line to be good enough for that, but like you need, I think he generally wants to keep the linebackers clean to play free.
Yeah.
And be able to be uninhibited, whether that's going forwards or backwards. And it's funny you say, like I've said as well, that's an attacking defense, right? I think I want to clarify that because the blitz rates aren't that much higher than what we saw under Eberflus.
Right.
But it's much more, like you said, downhill, much more.
Yeah.
We're bringing the fight to you. You're not bringing it to us.
Yeah. And I never got the impression Eberflus, and this is probably watering it down and distilling it way simpler than it was, but I never thought his blitzes were, I never thought he was very creative when it came to rushing the quarterback. I didn't think that the defensive line had a real creative plan when it came to rushing the quarterback. And I thought, I feel like we've seen the same Kyler Gordon blitz off the edge probably, once a game, and it's effective, but I think Dennis Allen's going to be a little more creative getting guys to the quarterback, and not just kind of relying on bringing one extra guy and hoping that they find that lane, to that pass rush lane where they're going to go in untouched. So I'm looking forward to it. I think Dennis Allen's a great defensive coordinator. I mean, the metrics kind of back up that as a play caller, he's the best. I mean, before he became a head coach, when he was simply a defensive coordinator under Sean Payton, he was the best defensive play caller by some I have some metric that measured it, but maybe EPA, I can't remember. But it'll just be interesting what sort of personnel changes he's looking for. And I do think of the current roster, linebacker is going to be one of those positions where it's like, okay, this has got a lot of investment in it money wise, but they might need to shuffle it a little bit to get it more towards what he's used to with his linebacking core.
Yeah, no, I mean, I kind of see that similarly. But Nick, why don't we jump into some
Yeah, let's
prospects
roll.
here, and let's start this thing off with Jalon Walker. He's both of our top ranked guy, I think. What did you see on the tape with Jalon Walker?
So talk about versatility. Jalon Walker, I had him far. I mean, not well. The big thing will be, will he be a down lineman, an edge rusher, or will he be a stand up linebacker in the NFL? He's kind of had a interesting career at Georgia. Sorry, I'm shuffling my papers. He was just a 1 year. I mean, he played all 3 years, but I think this past year was his first year as a starter. And he was really good. I watched the Texas tape, or one of the games I watched. Not the SEC championship game.
Okay. So the one where he was much more an off-ball linebacker.
Yeah, and I mean, Kirby Smart had him lining up at 3 technique, left defensive end, right defensive end, off-ball linebacker in the slot. I mean, Kirby Smart is a great defensive coach. So watching him use Jalon Walker as a chess piece, I sort of see that'll probably be his most effective route in the NFL. If you can get a coach that is, okay with not having a traditional off-ball linebacker. His weaknesses, he's very athletic. He's very fluid in the hips, very good mover, very, very good pass rush skills, very good hand technique. In the article I'd written, Bears fans will probably, if they remember Leonard Floyd, I saw Leonard Floyd in him a little bit, just from the size and the length and sort of the wiry frame, but you can see a little bit of room for muscle to be added.
I thought it was like watching late career Leonard Floyd.
Yeah.
Like when he was lined up at edge, it was like, okay, this looks like Leonard Floyd last year.
Yeah.
Not Leonard Floyd with the Bears.
Yeah, it is weird. It's Leonard Floyd was drafted as a defensive end who became a linebacker with the Bears. Jalon Walker is a guy that if the Bears drafted him, he's a linebacker that they'll probably turn into a defensive end in his first few years. But it'll really be, the question with him is what does he know as an off-ball linebacker? Because he's only played really for 1 season at the position, not at the position, but as a starter for the position. So I'll be interested when teams quiz him in the combine, because I think he could be and a lot of draft pundits or whatever are torn between whether even analyzing him as a linebacker or a defensive end. And I think with the pass rush moves he has, and he has good hand technique, he has good speed moves. His play strength could be a little better, but I think he'll be able to improve that at the next level. And is by no means bad. It's just compared to some of the other guys in the class who I think have a little more violence in their play strength. But yeah, he was very disruptive. Just a lot of fun to watch. Just was a headache for Texas. I mean, it was something, and I mean, it was a headache for a lot of teams, but that game against Texas, I think Georgia ended up losing. I think that was their first loss of the season, but I mean, it was not because of anything. I mean, he was constantly in the backfield, getting to the quarterback, hitting the quarterback, causing disruptions. So, I have him as my linebacker 1. He's a guy I would not be upset if the Bears drafted him. Probably not at 10, but if they were to trade back and get him in that, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how high he'll go. It'll be interesting too. He's another guy that he could blow up the combine and really shoot up draft boards. So I know right now he's sort of that end of first round range, but if he goes to the combine and just puts up insane numbers, I could see him even going higher to like that 10 to 15 range. And I mean, the Bears need all the pass rush help they can get. So he would be someone who Yeah, would be an interesting player for Dennis Allen. I'd be curious to see how Dennis Allen could use him if they were to draft him.
Yeah, I mean, so I watched the first game I watched to him was that Texas game where, he was lined up all over, but
Mm-hmm.
only 16 of his 53 snaps were rushing the passer. It was
Yeah,
like he was used much more heavily as a box linebacker in that game
yeah,
than in his other games. And that gave me the perception that, okay, I'm like, he's a linebacker. Like,
yeah.
and then I watched a few more games this week and I was like, okay, he is not a clear linebacker.
Right,
I was like,
right.
I felt like I was watching Micah Parsons out there.
Yeah,
Like like Micah Parsons' rookie year with the Cowboys, where he's just
right.
lining up everywhere
Yeah,
and rushing the passer from any given alignment. And it made me think, like, man, if I were a defensive coordinator, I wouldn't be trying to box this guy into anything.
yeah.
I'm
I'm
not
sure.
I'm not even giving him a position. I'm just
Yeah,
moving him wherever the matchup is most favorable.
I'm sure Dan Quinn is hoping that he falls to
Yeah.
what was it, 29,
Yeah.
30, because that's. I mean, yeah, Micah Parsons was who I thought watching him because um, he was just lining up all over the place. I mean, Micah Parsons was a little bit. I mean, he was kind of like he's cut from he's an odd guy.
Mhm.
Like just like he's. I really like Micah Parsons, but I mean, he's like I would play on concrete. He's got a different mentality.
Yeah, it's hard. I don't think your comp in your scout report was Micah Parsons. I
No,
was just like the usage just felt
yeah,
similar to that.
yeah, and I mean, I feel like Georgia front seven guys have such a high floor. I mean, and they get drafted every year high, and they don't tend to disappoint. It is a little different with Walker because he doesn't have the same experience. I think that some of the other guys that get drafted highly do. Uh, but yeah, I mean, he's just. I've got him. I guess PFF had him at 6'2", 245. But I mean, he looked like he could still put. I mean, he could very easily put on a little more weight. It didn't look like he was a heavy
Mhm.
245. It looked like he
Yeah.
could still fit some muscle on his frame and not lose.
He's still growing into his
Yeah.
frame, I think. Like,
So,
he's thick, but like
yeah.
it's not. I don't think he's maxed out by any means.
Exactly.
And so you have like a late first round grade on him. I've got an early second round grade, so we're
Okay.
pretty similar there.
Yeah.
Right now, I mean, on our board, he's number 11, which tells you a little bit about the depth of this draft class
Right.
at the
Right.
top. But we don't have a ton of receivers or cornerbacks or safeties on the board yet, so that's still going
Yeah.
to change quite a bit. But generally, I mean, how would you feel if they drafted Jalon Walker at 10?
I'd be all right with it. I would think if they were doing that, they were probably going to plan to use him at defensive end. Because and maybe I shouldn't say or use him as that like hybrid sort of player that they move all over the place. I mean, I can't really understate how disruptive I thought he was in
Mhm.
as a pass rusher. And I mean, this is against like good quality offensive line prospect. Like this isn't, it's
I watched him against Notre Dame, Bama, Texas, and Texas. Those are
yeah, yeah,
4 very good offensive lines with
yeah, and I
NFL
mean,
talent.
he just has a way of putting together his pass rush. He has a pass rush plan, which is rare for a linebacker, an off-ball linebacker. And he just is one of these guys that, yeah, if the Bears took him at 10, I think people would be surprised, but I think they'd be pleasantly surprised once they sort of saw him on the field because he's just a
Mhm.
menace.
You
But yeah,
know,
I'll be curious. Oh, go ahead.
I hadn't really thought about that question until just now. I'll tell you, I'd be juiced up
Yeah,
because I'd be like, Dennis Allen has a plan for this dude, and he's
yeah,
gonna be wrecking some games. Like
yeah.
I would like it. I don't even care what position he's at. I would be excited, and I'm not sure the general perception would be excited,
It would
but
be yeah, and it'd be a great way for them to hedge the current situation they have with Edmonds and, because Jalon Walker, you could his rookie year use him as a pass rusher and sporadically as an off-ball linebacker with the intent of, okay, next year if we move on from Edmonds, maybe we shift him into that more off stand-up linebacker, Micah Parsons game wrecker role. Um, so yeah, I think he would be, I know everyone wants offensive line, so, and it's tough to argue with it, but I think I think it'll be interesting too, as they get closer to the draft, if they clarify if he's going to be listed as a linebacker or a defensive end, because I do think people see linebacker and they immediately assume he's Roquan Smith. And,
Right.
and it's like, no, he's very much a pass rusher who can also play linebacker and drop into coverage and do it effectively because he's a very fluid athlete. So
Almost 50-50 pass rush coverage snaps this year
yeah,
from passing downs.
yeah, he's good. I mean, I think he's gonna be very good. So
Yeah. All right. Well, going to the other end, the SEC rivalry, our second linebacker, we got Jihaad Campbell.
yes.
Nick, what were your initial thoughts on Jihaad?
So initially I was low on Jihad. I watched the Vanderbilt game, and if you're not familiar with Vanderbilt, I mean, they do all sorts of eye candy and all sorts of misdirection, and their offense is kind of a pain, I imagine, to play if you're a defensive player. And Jihaad Campbell that was the one game where I thought he got exposed for looking in the back, like cheating a lot, cheating with his eyes, looking in the backfield, getting caught. Not exactly, watching his keys, sort of just getting a little bit lost in the sauce when it came to what the Commodores were doing. But then I watched him against UGA, and I thought it was a little bit of a night and day difference. I think he's another guy that lots of power. I mean, the power just pops off with him when it comes to. He's sort of like. Where Jalon Walker, I think you can honestly say he's a tweener, and could play defensive end. I think Jihaad Campbell is a guy that, like, this is going to sound weird, but Jalon Walker is a defensive end who I think can play off ball linebacker. Jihaad Campbell, I think, is an off ball linebacker that can occasionally line up a defensive end, but
And I think Campbell actually was an edge prospect coming
yeah,
out of high school.
and he lines up off edge. He doesn't have the same, I would say, I guess, advanced technique that I saw from Jalon, but he's still an effective pass rusher, and he's a guy that Alabama moved all around. When when Lawson went out with the injury, there was a big, I guess, to do about he didn't get the Campbell didn't get the green dot on his helmet, which a lot of people thought meant, well, maybe he doesn't understand the position all that well. And his coach came out and said, no, we move him around so much that it would be impossible for him to move around as much as he did, as well as kind of make the calls and all that. So he's another very versatile player. I thought he's a good run stopper. Does have pass rushing juice. I think he would be. I saw he's like a more violent Tremaine Edmonds, is what we had kind of talked about a little bit, which was, he's got that same frame, big guy, but not. He is much more of an attacking downhill version of Tremaine Edmonds. So, yeah, the more I watched him, the better I like, the more I liked him, I should say.
So I actually went the opposite route when I watched him. I watched, let's see, the first game I watched was the Georgia game, and he
Okay.
graded fairly well, but I was unsure about his run defense
Yeah.
coming out of that game. I liked his coverage enough, but I was like, how aggressive is this guy? And then I watched the Vanderbilt game, and his grade was worse than the Vanderbilt game.
Yeah.
But he made some plays as a downhill run stuffer that
Yeah.
had me shaking my head like, that's the stuff. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I mean. Like they say, you want to grade. I think does polls say you grade the flashes, or
yeah.
or whatever, and it's so you have to keep that in mind. I mean, yeah, and if you grade the flashes, I mean, you can see all the makings of a really solid, good linebacker. I think coaching will be really important, just
Yeah.
with kind of understanding, especially nowadays with so many offenses moving towards like misdirection and counter style off, it's one of those things that I think a young linebacker especially can get sort of discouraged, because it's easy to, cheat, to look in the backfield, and it's a lot easier to do that than
No,
to kind of like read your keys or,
he likes cheese. He
yeah,
takes it a lot.
yeah. And, and that could probably get better as he settles into a position at
I
the
think
NFL
so.
level. They've moved him around so much. He probably had so many things racking around in his brain. But I mean, he was such a athletic freak that it's, you got to move him around and take advantage of matchups. So,
I mean, he's the one linebacker in this class I felt like I watched that is not a liability in coverage
yeah,
and has all the traits and the proof to stack and shed. Like his
yes,
combination of size, strength, speed, and aggressiveness he's one of one in this class
yeah,
from that standpoint as an off-ball backer.
yeah, yeah. I mean, if Jalon Walker ends up being he would be the top off-ball linebacker
Mhm.
if Jalon Walker was a defensive end.
Right.
I think it's just, yeah, he kind of becomes the Robin to Jalon Walker's Batman, because it's like
Yeah.
Jalon Walker is a similar, he's got similar play style and like how Georgia used him, and it was just Jihaad Campbell is just a notch, but and it's all things that could be developed. Jalon Walker's,
Right.
I feel like Jalon Walker is benefiting from playing with, or learning under Kirby Smart and guys on the Georgia defensive line that are constantly getting drafted in the NFL. Jihaad Campbell, he'll learn, when he lines up as an edge rusher, he'll learn hand technique, and he'll learn, I think guys like him, I feel like they end up, because they're so much bigger or more athletic than guys that they're playing against, they don't particularly learn how to properly, like you said, stack and shed, or, they try to go through guys with their
Mhm.
athleticism. And it's not so much as big an issue with Jihaad as it is with some of the guys we'll talk about later. But it's one of those things where you'll see guys who are like, they try to go under a guy or something, and
And end
it's
up
all,
way behind the play because they had to run
yeah,
around a 300-pound
yeah,
guard. Like,
exactly. So, um, Jihad, I would, but see, he's one of those guys that, like, he's going to be drafted too high, I think, for the Bears. I feel like he'll go probably in the second round,
yeah.
maybe middle to end of second round.
Yeah, we
Um,
both got a second round grade on him.
yeah,
And
so
I mean, I don't envision a scenario where he makes a lot of sense for the Bears.
yeah, I would be shocked if they took him, because
Yeah.
it would be, yeah, he's kind of one of those guys. I'm trying to think of a team that would be a good fit for. I mean, I don't know. Maybe the Cowboys. Maybe Matt Eberflus wants a guy
I
like
mean, yeah, Matt Eberflus probably likes him. I mean, it makes
yeah,
and like the Bills probably like
yeah,
him.
yeah.
The Colts.
Because he's probably the best coverage linebacker from just a all-around coverage linebacker in the class as well.
Yeah, the best 3-down linebacker, I think, is the
Yeah,
way I'd put it. Like any scenario he can be out there,
yeah,
and you feel like you're gonna have a player eventually at every phase of the defense
yeah,
or of the game, whether it's
mhm,
run, pass. He
yeah,
can make a difference.
yeah.
Yeah. But next up here, we have Chris Paul Jr., also known as Pooh.
Yes.
What do you think of Pooh?
Pooh. Yeah, Pooh. Like, oh, I mean, I really like Chris Paul. I mean, Jihad gets a nod above him from just purely traits, just from a size standpoint. Because they have Chris Paul, like, it's so funny. Like, before the combine, you can get like 4 different height and weight sizes for these guys. So it's one of those things you have to put an asterisk next to any of it. But I had him at 6'1", 235, which the 235 is good. The 6'1's a little smaller, for a linebacker. But I mean, I thought he
I'm
was,
surprised he's only 6'1".
yeah, it's
He
weird. I
looks
mean,
taller than that.
yeah, and I think I saw one side lists him at 6'3", which I don't think he's 6'3". So it's like I would think maybe like a tall 6'1", maybe a short 6'2", if that makes sense. Like um, but he's probably, I thought he was probably the most polished off-ball linebacker in the class. Super high floor. I think you could draft him early third round and have a plug and play out, maybe 3-4 inside linebacker, maybe a outside linebacker in a 4-3. But I really liked, he had 54 run stops in 2024, which is great, and only a 7.6% missed tackle rate, which anything under 10 for a linebacker is, from my understanding, really, really good, or ideal, I should say. He's just, I think he's athletic, but he has an athletic ceiling that some of these other guys just, burst through. He's just not as athletic as a Jalon Walker. I think he's polished. He played at Arkansas. I don't think he's a fifth year. I think he's a true senior. But he has a good nose for the football, good sideline to sideline ability. The only dropping into zone coverage, there were some mishaps in mesh concepts. I saw him get turned around in mesh concepts, and you never know if that's like his teammates, and he's trying to make up for that.
I did notice a few times where he's pre-snap trying to get a guy's attention and pointing at something, and the guy doesn't catch it, and then it looks like he did something wrong. And
right.
It's almost funny how you need to read body language
Exactly.
and like some of the communication aspects in the all 22 to understand what's really happening sometimes.
Yeah. And they're never gonna I guess the good teammates are never gonna overtly just pull their hair out after a play towards their teammate. But
usually it's the guy who I think messed up that I'm looking at the body language.
Yeah.
They're standing with their arms down, like
yeah. I shouldn't have been looking at the scoreboard. But I like Chris. He is one of those players because he's a very good blitzer too. He is one of those guys that again, I don't know if he'll last to the end of the third, but if the Bears have 2 third-round picks, he could be a guy who, maybe Dennis Allen says this. I think he could fit into Dennis Allen's defense and fit in well. He's not. I mean, when Demario Davis came out, I think he ran like a 4.40 or something insane for a linebacker. And now it's going to drive me nuts because it was 6'2", 236 pounds. So he's basically the same size as Chris Paul.
Mario Davis beefed up then.
Yeah. But I mean, he ran like a 4.40, and I don't think Chris Paul is going to be that fast. I could see him maybe like 4.6. So, if he goes to combine, runs a 4.4, I could really see him. But I think he's a guy who, if he falls into the third round, he's a guy Dennis Allen could say, hey, let's take a crack at him, because I think he's another guy too that if they move on from TJ Edwards, he could very easily fill that outside linebacker role. I don't know, I don't know if maybe long term they'd want someone, maybe they want to move him a middle linebacker, but I think he's got versatility that he can play both. So
right now we both got a high to mid third on him. So it's not a stretch to say maybe he'll fall at the end of the third, but I did think when he gets squared up by a blocker, he's toast. That was my big takeaway. It's like he's pretty slippery, but there are times where he is just blown out of the run lane.
Yeah, he's
or I guess that was my big takeaway that you haven't touched on yet. I guess I should say.
I was gonna say, I agree. Like, that's the thing is he cannot square up against an offensive lineman. And that's in college. So it's, projecting that to the next level. It's not going to get easier at the NFL level. So then it becomes, okay, well, can he even take on a tight end at the NFL level?
But he's good at playing the angles and using his hands to prevent it from getting to that point.
Yeah, he's like I said, I think he has a really high floor. It will be interesting to see what if the Bears would consider, using one of their draft picks on him. I think there's some other guys in this class who are just a touch more athletic than him that maybe the Bears would prioritize over Paul. But I do think he's got I think he's got the highest floor and the most polished. I thought he was just the most polished linebacker, just from. But then again, I don't know how high his ceiling could get. So
I thought he had some of the best instincts in this class.
yeah,
That's
from a coverage standpoint. That's a good way of
He was
putting
just
it.
very smooth in coverage and felt
Yeah.
like he knew his checks. He got to them quickly and didn't hesitate, didn't pause,
Yeah.
just like move from one to the next.
Yeah, no
very, very
wasted
smoothly.
Yeah, no wasted motion. Because you see some of these guys that like they do the baby steps, or they'll get and a few of them are athletic enough that it doesn't make a difference. But yeah, Chris Paul, he moved with intention and like didn't he knew where he was going to go, and there wasn't any sort of I guess second guessing.
Yeah, agreed. Now moving on to our next guy, and this is a guy who I was really high on him last year when he was playing next to Jeremiah Trotter Jr.
Yeah.
at Clemson, is Barrett Carter. I didn't like his tape as much this year at first look, but then I watched the opening game from this year, and he looked like the guy from last year. So now I'm questioning, was he playing through an injury or something? Because like the end of the season tape did not match the beginning of the season tape.
Yeah, it was weird. I don't know what Clemson was doing with it. Like, because like you said, there was like a precipitous drop off from his production just from the last couple of years. And because this time last year, people were projecting he could be a fringe first round pick. He was that good. And then it sort of just I'm pulling up his stats now. But yeah, I mean, I noticed in the tape I watched, they kind of I feel like Clemson let him sort of spy and then react to the movement in front of him versus maybe scheming up things for him to rush the passer. Because that was where he was pretty good at the previous years, was getting to the quarterback. And then I thought there was a noticeable drop off in just his production in that regard. So I was in the same boat. He was interesting because he's another undersized prospect, 6'1", 230. So again, I don't know if that'll end up changing at the combine, but another guy, I watched a few. What game did I watch that? There was one game where they just had him sit there and spy the entire time, and he's really good at when he wants to rush the passer. He's really good at clicking and closing and going for the passer and not and getting home. But yeah, it was a strange. It's interesting whether he had an injury or if somebody on Clemson got injured that asked him to do more of the dirty work that maybe they were doing.
More of a Andrew Billings go down and
Yeah,
TJ Edwards look like crap kind of thing.
Yeah, I think he'll be a good value. It'll, I think he'll be one of these guys that he had a down year, but I think in the right defense he could really flourish because he does. I mean, he's undersized, but he's got pretty decent, long. It's not like he's small. He's just, or I shouldn't say, he's got fine length. He's, built well. Yeah, it was strange how he was used at Clemson this year. And I don't know, maybe that was just a byproduct of Jeremiah Trotter leaving and them realizing that, we need to have him kind of be more of a spot drop guy in the middle of the field and patrol that versus wreaking havoc on the quarterback.
Yeah, and I don't know. I feel like a part of me watches Barrett Carter and sees like shades of Roquan Smith. And
yeah,
a part of me sees like more Patrick Queen, I guess. Like it's like because those two are such similar physical skill sets, and it's just but the difference is instincts, right?
And like Roquan Smith is just such a violent football player and just so like instinctual and tenacious. And I didn't see that out of Barrett. I saw Patrick Queen as well. Like I saw somebody who is a good linebacker, but Patrick Queen flourished once Roquan Smith got there. And Then he went to Pittsburgh and he was okay. He was back to being the Patrick Queen of pre-Roquan. Like,
Yeah.
he's a fine linebacker, but he's, I don't think he's the difference maker. And with Barrett Carter, I think, Patrick Queen was a first round pick. I think Barrett Carter will be probably a third round pick. Maybe, it'll depend on the traits that what teams see. Cause I do think he's outside of his height, I think he's got some of the best athleticism of all the linebackers in this class, just with the way he moves. So
Yeah,
yeah,
you've got a high 4th round grade on him. I've got
yes,
a 3rd on him, and sure, I think either could be fair. It's the tape this year was weird. It's kind of hard to parse
yeah,
through and determine.
it's one of those things where what are team, when you try to think of like where he's going to get drafted, like I feel like this linebacking class has a wealth of guys who are all in that like 3rd round range, like decent. And it's like, would you take Barrett Carter over Chris Paul Jr.? Like, I personally wouldn't. I would take Chris Paul Jr., even if I know that Barrett Carter's ceiling is probably higher than Chris Paul Jr.'s. Give me the guy who I feel like can play, 7 or 8 solid years of football and isn't going to be a liability versus a guy who, could flame out or is just an unknown. I don't even know if, saying he could flame out is a little unfair because I don't think he was able to display what he can actually do this past year. So, he might have, I don't know if he was out of eligibility, but that wouldn't have been a bad idea to maybe go back and see if he can sort of reestablish himself as that, guy last year that was getting 1st round buzz.
Yeah, I mean it's going to be interesting to see where he ends up landing this year.
Yeah.
But moving to the next guy, and this is a guy who is on our cover photo for the YouTube
Yeah.
because he looks awesome in that picture. I was like,
yeah.
that's a linebacker right
Yeah.
there. But Danny Stutsman out of Oklahoma. This is a guy whose name has been in the draft circles for like 3 years now, and
Yeah.
he's finally leaving Oklahoma, going to the NFL, and there's something about his tape that just he's a gamer, and I just like
Yeah.
it. And
Yeah.
it might be the cowboy collar, I don't know,
Yeah.
but like because he doesn't stack and shed that well. It's not like
Right.
he's the most downhill or physical player, but his linebacker instincts just feel on point to me constantly.
Yeah. And he's like, he's one of those guys, like the more you read about him, the more you're like, this is a legit, like when you think of the old school linebacker, like leader of the defense type player, like that makeup, like this is a guy that's going to like, he could very easily be a culture changer, like in a locker room. Cause he's just a dude that like, you read the stories, he donated like a good chunk of his NIL earnings to the walk-ons at Oklahoma. He there's so much footage of him bringing up teammates that are feeling down I think they were they were saying he is the face of Oklahoma linebackers, and there's been so many that come out of there. I mean, I agree with you. I think he's another guy that he's 6'4", and what did I have him but he was another one that I thought he had a little bit of I wouldn't say a wiry frame, but it was still a little lean. Like he could probably put a little bit of muscle
Yeah,
on.
I think
And
he can add some mass and become more of that stack and shed player
yeah,
with time. Because I don't think he's not contact averse. Like he
no,
is fine
no,
with playing through traffic,
yeah,
getting in offensive lineman's face. It's just not. It's not his strength at this point, but I don't think he has. I'm struggling with the words for it, but I don't think that he avoids contact necessarily.
yeah, and he's looking for my note. I remember like he's one when we touched on it earlier with Jalon Walker Jihaad Campbell. He's one that I did notice, he would try to go beneath blockers or he would kind of try to like, instead of stacking and shedding, it was how can I get through this guy like sneakily versus, and
Yeah.
That's not to say, like you said, he does not shy away from contact. I just think it's probably something, stacking and shedding is one of those techniques that I don't know if, we go back to our first couple minutes we were talking about, these guys are not as polished a product as they were maybe 15 years ago, just because the linebacker position seems so undervalued that maybe the coaches are just saying, hey, you're bigger than them. You can go through them and it works 75% of the time. And, at the next level, though, it'll work 35% of the time. So you've got to work on that. But I mean, I thought he had, for a 6'4", like 240-pound linebacker, I thought he moved well in space. I thought laterally he moved well. There weren't a lot of, I did think, I believe his ball skills in coverage, he had no passes defensed or no interceptions this year. So, I don't know how much weight you put into a linebacker having ball skills, but it was something that dropped from, I think he had 2 picks last year. So it's just something that, I don't think that'll ever be, you're not drafting Danny Stutsman to get interceptions, but if you want him to drop into coverage against a tight end or drop into zone coverage, can he get into those passing lanes effectively? And zero passes defense would lead you to believe, well, maybe he kind of struggles in that area. So
yeah, he kind of reminds me of a guy who we've mentioned already, and a guy, former New Orleans Saint and Lion, Alex Anzalone. Like,
yeah.
I feel like I see some similarities in the way that both those guys play the game.
Yeah, that's good. Very tenacious sort of players that just play with their hair on fire and run around.
Yeah.
And yeah, I like Stutsman. He's another one that, end of the third round. Yeah, see, I don't know if I don't want to say, I wonder how athletic he is for what Dennis Allen wants.
Mhm.
I don't know, as a blitzing linebacker, I didn't see him get home as often as maybe
Yeah,
Demetrius
nothing special as a
Yeah,
blitzer.
it wasn't anything to write home about. And that could also be being 6'4". Those lanes are a little bit tougher to get through than someone like Chris Paul, who is questionably 6'1", maybe 6'2".
Yeah.
But it's just and a lot of it too is it's not just getting through the lanes, it's knowing when to attack the quarterback,
When to
and
time it, how to use your
yeah,
hands
and
to parlay off a block,
yeah,
and
and I thought Stutzman was okay at that, but not something that was not one of his better traits. I think if you're drafting him, you're looking for just that a very traditional middle linebacker who can kind of do a little bit of everything, which in today's NFL, again, we talked about he might be a guy that Matt Eberflus would love, because I just feel like Matt Eberflus would love a guy like Stutzman who can, just that, rah sort of middle linebacker who, he's not going to be Tremaine Edmonds in coverage, but he's big enough that I think Eberflus is a good enough linebacker coach that I feel like he could get him to be a pretty solid linebacker.
yeah, I mean, I think he's truly, I think he's a higher floor guy in this
Yeah.
class. Like, I have we both have 4th round grades on him, but I mean, I have his floor as high of a backup as you can be. So,
Yeah.
like, he is like a borderline potential starter to me.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
is his floor, because I think he's just going to hang around the league and he's just going to keep getting chances because he does things the right way, and
Yeah.
he seems like a leader and a glue guy in a locker room, and he's going to hang around and be starting at times.
Yeah. Yeah. Were you was it him that you said you saw Nick Kwiatkowski, a little Nick Kwiatkowski?
Yeah, a little Nick
Yeah.
Kwiatkowski in
I thought
there.
that was
I
a
think
great comp.
that's a
Yeah.
similar kind of career type that I think
Yeah.
would be like that. That's Danny Stutz, but that's probably his middle ground. I think is a
Yeah.
Nick Kwiatkowski type
Where
of
you're just
career.
kind of like, this guy's good. He's going to get a second contract. It'll be a decent deal. And then, he'll never be a Brian Urlacher, but like
Yeah,
he'll be a solid, guy in the middle of your defense that you don't have to worry about replacing because he's not a huge liability.
yeah. Now let's get to Demetrius Knight, and I think this is I think he's a conflicting watch
Yeah.
If I think he is or conflicting, probably a polarizing watch, because like I feel like you and I had a bit different takes on him,
Yeah.
but I could see what you were saying. But like I don't know, he was just a hard read in general. But what was your take on Demetrius Knight?
So I thought he was the most violent linebacker in the class. I thought, you know,
Well, outside of Jalon Walker.
yeah, but like I just thought this guy, I mean, he flew downhill. He was like a bull just running through the line of scrimmage. And I mean, he's built like I don't think you can add any more weight to him. I don't know. I mean, he's a grown man. He's 25 years old. Like he's a 6-year senior. Like delivered DoorDash because he has a family. Like this is a grown adult. So I mean, you're getting a guy, if you're going to draft him, who is not, I don't know how much more development he can actually have. And he moves laterally, is not his lateral agility is toast. I mean, I think he's adequate at the college level. I don't know, he is a very downhill attacking linebacker who, I just thought attack the line of scrimmage, but I definitely had flaws in his, or holes in his game, I should say. And really the big one will be, and his hips look like they're super glued when it comes to, coverage. But other than that, I mean, which is a big flaw, like it's not something to like understate, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have a spot in the NFL. I think, I just love the way he played. Like I love the
Yeah.
violence he played with, because it was just, you could see like there was no holding up. You see some of these guys and there's a little bit of they pull, and he hit I can't remember what I was watching something, and Rick Spielman, the former Vikings general manager,
Mm-hmm.
um, said that somebody looked like they hit hollow, and what he meant was like when they went to tackle someone, they sort of just bounced off of them, and it was like a hollow tree, and that is the exact opposite of Demetrius Knight. I mean, this
Yeah.
guy hits like it is. He lays the wood, like it is
Okay,
just.
so I guess we did see him pretty similarly. I must be misremembering. I thought your scouting report was a bit more favorable of his coverage, and
Right.
I think what I'm probably mistaking is I didn't see the hip tightness as much as hesitation, and
Maybe.
so
Yeah.
it's probably both,
Yeah.
honestly. But like I felt like he was very hesitant at times in coverage, and like
Yeah.
almost looked a little lost on occasion. But then
Yeah.
just once he after a hesitation step, he was like just firing again,
Right.
like just going 100 miles an hour. Um,
Yeah.
but so let's see, we've both got we comped him to Kenneth Murray Jr., which was that was I remember thinking that one, like just I haven't watched much Kenneth Murray Jr., but like
Yeah.
his physical traits were similar or felt
Right.
similar to what I was seeing on mock draft. And when I pulled up Kenneth Murray Jr.'s draft profile from Zerline, I was like, yeah, this is the same
Yeah. I mean, he is a guy that I would be intrigued if the Bears would take a crack at him. Cause yeah, I I noticed he looked at the court. I noticed, and I don't know if this is because he's aware of his own, like he's cognizant of his own limitations in coverage, that he really liked to sort of cheat into, like when he dropped into coverage, it probably plays into the hesitation where I felt like he was more trying to guess and watch the quarterback's eyes and sort of, instead of really understanding like the
thing.
nuance of
Yeah,
zone coverage. And I think
100%.
that's kind of where he's probably knows, like, I don't move well, or I don't move as well as some of these other guys. I got to do everything I can to get a leg up in this. So um but I mean, just the way that he like moves downhill, I mean, he was just blowing up. I mean, he was blowing up offensive linemen, and
Yeah.
um
He's
you know
got that natural leverage. I mean, he's like what
yeah,
6'1", 245. Like he's a
yeah.
tank.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it's the difference in build between him and like who else would, just a few,
He's what
10
Chris Paul
pounds.
hopes to be.
Yeah. Like if Chris Paul could get, I guess that's only 10 extra pounds for Chris Paul, but it's
Yeah.
just the way that they wear those 10 extra pounds.
Mhm.
I mean, Demetrius Knight he's just like like a barbarian, like the way he's built, like, and the way he plays. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Go ahead.
I was gonna move it on. Were you ready to go? Or?
No, yeah, I was just gonna say I don't know if the Bears would draft him. I don't know if his limitations in coverage would prevent Dennis Allen from, but he is the type of I think he's the template for when it comes to attack, like what they would look for attacking downhill. It's just they
Yeah.
probably want someone with a little bit more coverage skills.
Now, talk about coverage skills.
Yeah. Yeah.
Carson Schwesinger out of UCLA. I'm in the middle of writing this guy's scouting report. I was hesitant. I was like, can I make him top 100? He's 225
Dude,
pounds. How can a 225-pound linebacker be a top 100 player? I was like, you know what? His tape's too fun. I'm doing it.
Oh, I mean, you say that, but I've seen people recently suggest he's the top linebacker in the class. Like, and you know,
he has the best linebacker tape in the class.
Yeah, and not above Jalon Walker, but above, you know, all the other off-ball linebackers. And I mean, it is, yeah, I mean, you know, he is, I think, athletically speaking, what I would think, and just the way he flies around the field is probably what Dennis Allen is looking for in a linebacker.
Yeah.
I think this is, you know, if he could put on maybe 15 pounds and not lose that natural athleticism, which I don't know how feasible that is, but yeah,
See, I am skeptical that he can add much more weight. Like,
yeah,
I don't know that his frame can really support it. He seems like he might be kind of maxed out. This guy was a walk-on.
Yeah,
Like wide receiver in high school,
Yeah.
wide receiver and defense. I assume he was like a linebacker safety hybrid based on his stats that are on his UCLA page. It just says like tackles, sacks, tackles for loss.
Right.
But it doesn't say what position he played on defense. But like his wide receiver experience shows in coverage. Like he instinctually feels the routes that he understands the concepts and feels what's going on behind him and just gravitates towards it.
Dude, yeah. He was running stride for stride with a wide receiver against USC. And I mean, it was a deep seam route. And I mean, it was, you would have thought it was Cooper DeJean with the way that he was, you know, he reminded me of a bigger Cooper, you know, just like with the way that he kind of like moved in space. Just kind of, you know, and I think Cooper DeJean, I can't remember if he was a former, I think he did everything. He was like a former quarterback, I think. But, you know, you get these guys that played these skill positions like wide receiver, and it shows up on tape when they're playing again, you know, in coverage, because he just looks so much more comfortable dropping into coverage and just knowing what routes are coming and kind of being able to match coverage and not look. And I think he only did it in 1 year in college. Like he was he is a true projection, but it's just, there's a lot to like on tape. Like,
I mean, he's barely played like 800 something snaps. Like he only played like something like 30 snaps before this year.
Yeah.
And then the second he gets the chance to start, he breaks Eric Kendrick's consecutive game record at UCLA with 10 plus tackles. Like it's like, boom, he's killing it.
Don't you wonder, like, that happens often with some of these guys? Like Jalon Walker is another guy where they're basically 1 year starters, and I'm like, and then when they get their chance, they just, you know, you would think, especially at UCLA, which isn't the defensive powerhouse that like Georgia is. It's like, was this guy just has he been developing, or is this an oversight by the coaches that it's just like,
man, I don't know. I have to think the walk-on aspect had something to do with it.
I bet you're right.
Like, all I know is there's a rep where there's 2 reps from his game against Minnesota where he's 2-gapping Ariante Ursare, who weighs 340 pounds.
Yeah.
I just do not understand that physics. Like, I don't get it. Like, he is so good with his hands at understanding a leverage. He gets blown out of the run lane. Don't get me wrong. He gets blown the hell out of the run lane at times.
Right.
But I think I had him getting blown out of the run lane 4 times in that game. And I had him winning with hand fighting at the line of scrimmage like 8 times. So it was just like a wild ratio for his size that just like, I don't know if he can add weight, but I have to think a creative defensive coordinator will find a Swiss Army knife role for this guy, and he will absolutely kick ass in that.
Yeah, because I mean, I would think if a team's drafting him, I would hope that they're not drafting him thinking he can be a thumper that can go and,
Right.
but there's creative ways that you can use him to, attack certain gaps and funnel, and he's a guy that is certainly not shy to at least try to,
Mhm.
and he'll redirect traffic inside and yeah, you mentioned him to me and I started watching his tape and I was like, God, this guy does move really really well. And
He really like traffic. He navigates traffic better than any
yeah,
linebacker in this class. Like the way that he can funnel through the crap and
yeah.
find his way in the run lane is really impressive. But the one major negative for him outside of size is size related. He gets wrecked by play action.
Oh yeah.
Like he is so eager to get ahead of the blocks and play action.
Mhm.
There's no recovering. You need to have a plan around that if you draft him.
Right.
And that's why I don't think he can be a true, like, why he needs to be a Swiss Army role,
Yeah.
because either he's going to start getting torched in the run game or torched in play action.
Yeah, I wonder. I don't know who you see. Like, okay, so UCLA, that was Chip Kelly up until this past year, wasn't it? Or has he
Right.
been
Yeah.
gone? And then I don't know. Do you know who their defensive coordinator was? Or
No, I think I'm not sure. I assume it's the same guy as last year with the creative blitzes that they did with
yeah,
the
because
like Gabriel brothers and
yeah, because I would think
Latu.
you would think uh biting on play action could be something so not easily coached out of a guy, but coached
Right.
out of a guy. I mean,
But so with him, the thing that I wonder though, if he stops attacking the run lane ahead of the blocks,
mhm,
does that mean he becomes a much less impactful run
right.
defender?
Yeah. That'll be interesting. Yeah, that always cracks me up. I remember a very, obscure stat with Roquan Smith. You might remember
Mhm.
this, but it
Yeah.
was, with
I
his
remember I was like tweeting back and forth with Eric Eager about it, asking questions.
was it the depth of, when on play action, how
Mhm.
much, and it was, he was slowly, was it inching closer to the line of scrimmage? Because we Bears fans, we try to think of any way we're such, optimists in the
Yeah.
face of, just constant, depression that we're like
Optimists when everything is going wrong, and pessimists when everything's
yeah,
going right.
and it was that was the year that, I think they traded him, and people were like, "Well, look, he's literally, it was, such an inconsequential amount that he was, losing, and he was basically, he was cheating on play action. He was going, an extra, third of a yard into, biting and play action before he could recover, and people were using that as, justification for, he's lost a step, and it
That's
was
more of a
just
statement about the state of the D line than
yeah,
anything with
exactly,
him. Like,
exactly, but
if you can keep him clean, he's fine. If you
yeah,
can't, he's gonna cheat. And that's
yeah,
probably somewhat similar with Schwesinger, but I don't know. They take him like Schwesinger in the fourth round. I mean, I'm thinking he's gonna land in my top 100. I know he will. That doesn't mean
yeah,
I think he's worth a top 100 pick, but I think he's one of the top 100 players for the Bears to consider.
yeah.
And he's an interesting one.
There's too many traits to ignore with a guy like that.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things where it's you start you start getting into that third, fourth round turn or the fringe top 100 guys. And I mean, he's a perfect example of a guy that, I prefer I always have said I like the higher floor guys, but he's a guy that sometimes the tape is just so good and there's so much material to build from that, can you get a guy, can you get the next Demario Davis in the fourth round? And is that something Dennis Allen is like, I'm a good enough coach that I have confidence that I can get this guy to where he could be. And then it's like, okay, well, yeah, take a swing at him. If you're getting him in the fourth round, there's not really a huge, incentive to have to play him. We saw that with the Kieran Amagaji. They hit
Yeah.
him for as long as they possibly could. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah,
But next guy we have is somewhat similar in
yeah,
kind of traits wise is Jack Kiser, a little heavier and I think a little more room to add back. Like I think the upside for Kiser out of Notre Dame is that I think he can be a more traditional linebacker with a little added weight, and I think he can add some weight. But
Yeah.
what did you think about Kiser's tape?
I liked Kiser. So he had like a 4.2% missed tackle rate, which is insane. I think I saw he had 1,781 career snaps and missed 11 tackles like over his career. Like it was just something ridiculous. And he's played the most games for a Notre Dame. Like he had 63 games, broke the record for the most games played at Notre Dame. He's another guy like Stutsman, a great sort of glue guy that is. I think I had some questions. Another 6-year senior, so older prospect. I don't know if at this point it's kind of a what you see is what you get, but I mean, what you're getting is a sure tackling, solid linebacker who I didn't see any huge holes in his game. I didn't see a super high ceiling just because of the way I didn't think he was I didn't see I didn't look at him and think athleticism, but I thought I think I brought up Jack Sanborn when I was watching him as a guy who just you just see a football player who I think his play speed is actually faster than his would like his 40 time would be. I think he's just an instinctual enough guy that, he might run like a 4.8 40, but on tape he'll look like he's running a 4.5 because he's just around the ball and he can diagnose the play so quickly. Very high football IQ. Doesn't seem like he gets fooled a lot. Very, yeah, I liked him. I don't know where did you have him in your grades for draft? Like, did you have him as a 4th round pick or
4th round guy?
Okay.
And I was perplexed by his usage because
Yeah.
I thought he showed some of the best coverage and zone coverage instincts of any linebacker I watched in this class.
Yeah.
And he came off the field a lot in passing situations. And
Yeah.
it's not like the reps where he was out there, it didn't feel like he was being hidden.
Right.
It didn't feel like he was doing the simplest things. It felt like he was progressing through 2-3 checks and following routes behind him that he didn't have business following. And
Yeah.
like, I didn't understand why he was getting taken off the field, especially as a captain,
Yeah.
team captain. It was odd to me, but I really liked his feel for zone coverage, and I liked his willingness to get dirty at the line of scrimmage when going through run fits. I don't think he has the mass to be a powerful downhill player like that.
Yeah.
But he showed the willingness to, and he's clearly learned how to. He's picked up some tricks along the way of how to sort through the line of scrimmage.
Marcus Freeman, former Bear.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was I liked watching his tape. I again, he was another one of those guys that I thought fit into that like just a solid football, like another high floor, solid.
He's going to be at least a solid backup and good teamer for
Yeah. Well, that's what I think he had special teams, academic Heisman finalist. I mean, it was just, he's one of those guys that like I feel like he's going to get drafted. You could draft him solely off of his like character.
Yeah.
And then, I do think, there's something to be said about a guy who just doesn't miss tackles. And, if you can be a sure tackling, maybe for him, it said as an outside linebacker, you'll have a spot in the NFL or a 3-4 inside linebacker. Put him next to Roquan Smith. I'd love to see like what he could do in Baltimore. It's like, I feel like they have play styles that would complement each other well. Cause, he's kind of flown under the radar, which is weird because he's such a heralded player from Notre Dame, but like you see him and you're like, yeah, I don't hear much about this guy. And then you watch the tape and I'm like, he's a good linebacker. Like, again, it's his tape. He's not going to fly off the tape like some of these other guys, athletically speaking, but it's a lot of mistake-free football when you watch him play.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I messaged you early after watching and being like, I like this guy and I don't get why he's not on the field more.
Yeah.
So he's a guy who I think would be a really strong fit with the Bears. Like
Yeah.
I think that he's the type of guy Dennis Allen could bring on and ask to play real snaps right away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, next guy up, interesting
Yeah.
play. Smael Mondon
Yeah.
Jr. out of
Desolation of
Georgia.
Smael.
Is it Smael or Smael being a Georgia
Smile.
man?
I think it's Smile. Like I
Okay.
kept thinking Smog when I was watching, like when I was looking at him, but he's another like really like wiry frame.
I mean, he's like what 235,
Yeah,
230
and like
maybe. He looks smaller than he's
yeah,
listed.
and super high. I think he was like a 5-star recruit, very highly recruited linebacker. And I thought he was decent. I mean, I saw him, he was a guy that I'm not sure. He didn't seem like he seemed like he was cleaning up a lot of plays. I'll say, like when I watched him, it seemed like he was doing a lot of cleanup work and and not really enforcing his will, kind of following the action. I who was it? I'm trying to think of the other guy that was really had a. There was a guy that had a similar frame to him. I'm sorry, I'm trying to go back through my notes and find it, but where was it? Oh well, I have no idea. But yeah,
I mean, if you want to keep looking, I can talk some about him because he's like, I feel like a defense that wants to get more hybrid with their nickel package. Smael Mondon could make a lot of sense where like he can be more of a hybrid backer nickel corner. But I'm not sure that's where the Bears are headed when you have a player like Kyler Gordon already.
Yeah, I saw some people suggest he could be a big nickel, like a Buffalo nickel, or one of these guys that can come out. And, I don't know, when it comes to a guy like that, how high are you drafting someone that might? I mean, I guess in today's NFL, plenty of teams are in their nickel package as base, but it's like, what is that something? Can he play nickel consistently, or is he just a guy that like you go out and you have him cover like a Travis Kelce when he's in the slot? Like
He's a Ted, right? A Ted linebacker,
yeah,
a tight end blanket, and that's kind of what he does.
Yeah. Who was that guy? Dane Crickshank, was that his name? That
Yeah,
that was like the tight end eraser. That was like, yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I didn't see a lot of like physicality when I was watching him in like run support. Now that's not to say I didn't see a lot of. He was eager to help and run support. It just seemed like he's too small to really make a huge impact as a linebacker. So yeah, I do think maybe long term he would have a spot as like a Buffalo nickel or big nickel, and then special teams, which I can't imagine the Bears would use a draft pick on someone like that where they are now. I mean, unless he falls to like the 7th round or so, and unless it was just obscene value, like
I'm in the same spot with him where I'm just kind of like, I can see a role somewhere like with Spags or something. I could see a role for him, but like I don't think it's here.
I don't think Kirby Smart knew what to do with him. Like,
Yeah,
because he was another guy. Like, I think he was like really highly recruited, and so those guys are going to get on the field. But it was just like, you saw the creativity with Jalon Walker, and Kirby Smart is really good about getting his guys favorable matchups and kind of scheming them to where, they're going to make an impact. And I kind of thought Smael was just sort of a guy that was like, you just sort of patrol the middle of the field and just clean up the act. A lot of his run play, a lot of his run defense was going and pushing a guy out of bounds who had broken a 7-yard run. It wasn't a lot of impact.
More pursuit like than anything.
So I think he has a place in the NFL. I think it's such a relegated role that and like you said, I don't know how much more he can add to his frame. So it's kind of like, maybe a strong safety, who knows? Like something like that. Like
all right, and then last guy we got here is a guy who I haven't actually gotten the chance to watch yet, so I'll let you talk a little about
Yeah,
him.
I just
Cody Simon out of Ohio State.
I kind of had him as an honorable mention. He's another. I think you could sort of put him in the same camp as Jack Kiser, Danny Stutsman, as these guys who are just
He
glue
was a
guys.
top tier recruit. I know that.
Yeah, and he was this year PFF's most valuable linebacker. He had 8 sacks this year, 67 tackles, the defensive MVP for Ohio State in the championship game, 6'2", 235. And again, I think kind of limited in coverage, a little 6'2", 235. So he's got a decent frame, not undersized. He fits in with some of the other guys we had talked about. I just sort of like it was just a lot of what I liked was the same stuff I liked about Jack Kiser, was just not a lot of mistakes. Doesn't flash off the screen or flash off the tape, but a really reliable linebacker who I don't know if he'll go top 100. But I wouldn't be surprised if he went top 100. I feel like some team is gonna fall in love with the accolades and the well-earned accolades, I should say. But he was the heart and soul of Ohio State's defense, and just a guy who could be, when you get to that fringe day 2, day 3 type players, he's in one of those guys like him and Jack Kiser, who I think you could do a lot worse when it comes to trying to find a plug and play starter.
Yeah. So. Now that we've gone through all of them, who are I want to mention something that I meant to mention a little bit throughout the show, but there was a quote from Zach Bond the other day about when him and Jalon Carter are trying to figure out run fits, that Zach Bond told Jalon Carter, just do your thing and I'll make you right.
Nice.
And I think that is a Dennis Allen thing.
Yeah.
I think that is a Dennis Allen. We want our defensive linemen eating.
Right.
We want our linebackers to make them right as often as possible. So we're not overly structuring the run fits, but we're putting a lot on our linebackers to make it work.
Right.
What linebackers in this year's class could you see the Bears taking with Dennis Allen's vision of that?
I think Chris Paul would fit that. I think he's a guy who, like I said, he has a ceiling on his athleticism, but I think he's a really smart player. I think he is a guy who could erase some mistakes from his defensive linemen. So long as they, like you said, they eat and they keep those big guys off of him. He's a guy that I could see, doing that. I think Cody Simon and Jack Kiser would be guys that are also, because you're really looking for really guys with really high football IQ that are going to be able to sort of diagnose, if like in that example, if Jalon Carter makes a mistake, or if the intimation is that like, hey, you do whatever you're going to do. If you're supposed to be in the A gap and you shift over and you attack the B gap, I'll figure out what to do. And, and so I think, you want a guy that's going to understand the flow of the play right off the snap, see what his linemen are doing and be able to react. And I think, I think Demetrius Knight is another guy, but I don't know. He's just, I think of the guys I mentioned, he'd probably be more at the bottom, just athletically speaking, from sideline to side. Athletically meaning, like I said, his lateral athleticism.
Yeah.
I think Kiser, Simon. I think personally, I think Chris Paul would probably be if they were going to get someone before day 3 that could do that. I would if Chris Paul was there at like pick 100, I would be beating the table if I was in the draft room saying, get this guy, you know, unless
Yeah.
someone, you know, unless like Jihaad Campbell is like fall into like one, but he, you know, of
Yeah.
these, you know, if
Realistically.
if you've got, you know, Chris Paul and Danny Stutsman and Cody Simon, all these guys, Demetrius Knight, and it's like, I'd be like, and you know, Dennis Allen is like, I need at least one linebacker. I'd be like, dude, just get Chris Paul, because I feel like he could be a guy who would come in and figure it out quickly. He's shown an acumen. I think he's an intelligent guy, but I believe he was on the all SEC honor team. So he's a smart player, instinctual player. So what about you? Who would you?
I think Kiser. Like
Yeah.
that's where and I'm with you on Paul, but it's just a question of whether you can actually get him where it makes sense for you to.
Yeah.
I think Kaiser's where I'd go. I think Schwesinger is much more specialty than that. I
Yeah.
think because he needs to move before he can read the D line.
Right.
So that kind of changes that. He's more D line dependent, where we're looking for a linebacker who's independent of their D line.
Yeah.
Maybe I could see a Stutsman fitting in that. Just having like it's high football IQ guys, right?
Yeah.
Who read and react very quickly. So to me, that's Kiser or Stutsman probably.
Yeah. Yeah. That's and like you said, guys who are not afraid to shy away from contact and let some of the. Are you assuming all these guys would be middle linebacker or?
Yeah, I'm talking about off ball linebackers. So Mike or Will, like one of those two.
Yeah, because like, gosh, I mean, it'd be interesting. Like, if you're looking at it from like a KJ Wright, Bobby Wagner type standpoint, like which ones could play those roles? Because like a lot of that is, I could see all those guys being, and they're all pretty selfless in that, part of it too, especially with like the run fits thing, is just attacking a gap and trusting that your running mate will clean up the dirty work or clean up. Yeah. So, I think, this is a good, for the Bears, I feel like this is a good class for what I think they need, which is, and I don't think it's not, it's not a top heavy class, it's just, I think it's an underrated class. I don't know. I'd be curious, like where some of these guys go. Cause like, Schwesinger is an interesting one. There's some guys we talked about, that we haven't talked about that, I'll be curious where they go. The guy out of Oregon, whose name is
Jeffrey Bassa.
That's it, Bassa. Yeah, I keep wanting to say Bosa, like because he's one of the Bosa brothers. But there's guys that in the Nebraska guy you mentioned, Lambert. Was it Lambert?
Lander.
That's right.
Lander Barton.
Yeah.
Great linebacker name.
That's such a Nebraska Cornhusker name. Yeah. Like I'm Lander Barton.
He's like a Cornhusker.
Yeah, I drive a Thresher when I'm not playing football. But there's some guys. I mean, Barrett Carter will be. I still am so interested in what he's going to be at the next level. I mean, I know taking it off track, but like, I feel like I have a really decent feel for most of these linebackers and kind of what they are as players. And like Barrett Carter is the one guy I still am like, I have no idea.
It's a mystery box. He could
it is. It's like, because even like Schwesinger, it's like, yeah, he played 1 year, but I can kind of, even if it's a projection, you can kind of see what it is. Like Barrett Carter is like such a, because when I was watching his tape, I'm like, he moves a little like Roquan Smith, but it's just, that's, he's not Roquan Smith, but maybe he could be. I don't know. He's a mystery box. Like,
anything in between Smith and Queen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But Nick, any final thoughts before we close this thing out?
No, I think, like I said, it's going to be interesting what the Bears do, how they attack the linebacking position, because I do think it's one of the more important positions in Dennis Allen's defense, if not the most important. So, yeah, there's some interesting guys out there. I'll see, can't wait for them to draft Jalon Walker 10th overall and everyone to lose their mind. Or
I mean, I wouldn't be upset about it. It's
no,
wild. It's
I wouldn't
wild.
either. I wouldn't
But
either.
all
That
right,
so
Nick, why don't we close this thing out? Anyone who's listening, watching, thank you guys for sticking
thanks
with us.
everyone.
Make sure to go follow Nick on Twitter at sniper_1154. You can catch him on the Reddit channels too on our Shy Bears.
Yep,
But
same thing. Yeah, you'll see me poking the anthill. Yep, come check
Yep.
it out.
all right, why don't we get out of here with a good
All
old
right.
bear down, Nick?
Thanks, dear. Bear down, guys. And until next time.
Bear down.